until the 31st of December. But I've spent time at the University of Johannesburg as a council member, and then I became deputy chairman of council, and then chairperson of council, and at that time I came into office the same time with Prof Tshilidzi Marwala. I must say the first important thing for me when I took over this role, I've been talking to a lot of friends, it's like taking a CEO role. People will ask you, are you going to change the strategy of the business? Are you going to change the way the business operates? And you often come in, you want to put your own stamp of approval or your own identity into an institution. And Prof Marwala and I have conversations. We formalize them when we do our one-on-one performance reviews, but I knew what the agenda was. For me, the most important thing about a university is that I reflect on my days as a school kid. I reflect on my days when I was at university. And I say to myself, when you get a young boy or girl, I call them that, no disrespect. Where's Mr. Manana? He's here. No disrespect to you and your stakeholder grouping. You arrive at an institution, your father told you that you must go and study to be an engineer. And I've come across several friends of mine who completed their degrees. And when they complete their degrees, they are clever people. I'm giving you an example. And the person, after completing their degree, they say, and then they will tell you that I'm not going to practice that line of qualification. I was completing the degree because my father forced me to do this. So I'm going to start something else. And then they go and study something else and do it very well as well. My point is that I made it my dream that any child who arrives at University of Johannesburg to come and register, whether you are accompanied by your father and your mother, if you're lucky, or whether you are on your own, your parents are at work, they are not allowed to accompany you to university to register. You get confused, you don't know what to do. And I wanted this institution to be that welcoming environment, and Kinta will attest to that, that make sure that when the administration day happens, when students arrive at the gate, let them be safe, let them be comfortable, let them feel comfortable about this institution that they are coming to join. That was the first thing for me. And I think Prof Marwala will attest to the fact that, Professor Kinta, you lived up to that. We made sure that other than making registration a bit sophisticated and a bit electronic and look sexy that people can register online and the like, but let's make the environment peaceful. Let's make it welcoming. Let's make sure that whoever walks around campus, they come in here and they are welcomed at this institution. I'm sure we've achieved that. The second big thing for me at this university was something that you'd be criticized for, and I always get criticized for being a micromanager in my life. I am. And some clever people, psychologists, say it's a weakness. I love it, it's a strength. I'm not going to get rid of that. And I'm too old to do that, to forget about that. I'm a micromanager, I like to follow people. Wherever you go, I'll always follow you as long as you work with me. And in this university, I used to phone anybody who's a chief operating officer. But I haven't phoned you. I've been nice to you. I would phone if I pick up a piece of paper or a stub of cigarette outside campus. And even if a young student phoned me and told me that the bathrooms are not clean or the bathrooms are not okay or anything that I picked up. Why? Because I wanted this university to be the best environment, the best place to study, a beautiful institution. And those first two, the administration side and seeing this university being beautiful, may be seen as ordinary things, but they are so special in people's lives. And then I move to the third issue that I want to talk to you, that is motivated by the conversation that I pick up from people saying that there are there's one university in Johannesburg, it's called Witwatersrand University, and then there's a high school called UJ. And that motivated me to strongly make sure that me and Prof Marwala will attend this university and make it the best university. And Prof Marwala will talk to you about rankings later. I'm not good at translating the whole story of rankings. I don't understand it well, but Prof will talk to you. And I'm proud to say that that man sitting there, Prof Marwala, has done a fantastic job. Fantastic job. Not alone, with the team that he's worked with. the MEC, the Senate, everybody in this university. The team has ensured that they achieve the results they've achieved in terms of the global rankings to be where they are. And if you watched a movie called The Godfather, they say the ships must sail the same direction. That's what Prof Marwala liked to do. And I'm proud of the fact that he's led a strong team, a capable team, and they achieved that, and I'm grateful for that. The fourth issue I'd like to talk to you then, it's a basic thing talking about the finances of a university. I know people take that for granted. This country has got 26 universities, if I'm not mistaken, public universities, and then there are others which are not. Am I right, Prof Marwala? And what has worried me about these institutions, it's when universities are put under administration. That has worried me. I look at those universities that are put under administration, and I vowed, and Prof Marwala will remember me saying, we are not going to be put under administration. In fact, we will make this university wealthy. I thought Prof Marwala will stay for 2 terms, but we'll talk about that later. We have made sure, and you make sure that a university like this one has got strong finances by simply making sure that the financial position is managed in a prudent manner. Make sure that you are ruthless in managing the costs, the procurement, the 2 cents that comes into this university. I'll give you a simple example. I was asked a question about using headhunters or search firms to search for senior roles in an institution like this one. And I'm very uncomfortable about that, because I can't part with R1 million in a public institution like this one to go and pay a search company. I'm not criticizing such companies, they're doing a fantastic job, but I believe universities must be managed or administered in such a way that we are prudent in managing the finances of the university. Again, Prof Marwala will talk about the numbers later, and you'll see how the team here, together under his leadership, under the leadership of the MEC, the Senate, and the other structures in the university, the council and the like, have worked well in ensuring that this institution is well managed. Number 4, security and safety. Ladies and gentlemen, this university is still not safe for me. I still feel this university is not a safe place. My story about the safety and security of students in this university, and professors and lecturers and everybody who's employed in this institution. I cannot imagine a parent who sits in some town 1,000 kilometers away who has delivered his son or daughter here to be under our custody, to be under our tutelage, and education being delivered to this young person, and yet they are not safe. Not safe where they stay, not safe in walking around, not safe in enjoying themselves and walking around the campus, which is their own campus. I think we still need to do more in that area. I'm not happy about that. We've tried with Prof Marwala. Every time I receive phone calls, especially on a Saturday morning, Prof Marwala calling me that we have an accident, something happened. Ladies and gentlemen, that really, really breaks my heart. Beyond that, there's the issue of health and wellness of the students. And I watched something that's happening in the mining industry, and I relate it to this, to an institution like a university, and I'm saying, in the mining industry these days, we no more only worry about safety, either on an open cast mine or underground or in offices. We now worry about the wellness of the employees. We worry about the mental health of people. We worry about how healthy are you as a lecturer, as a professor. Either you stretched, you work hard, you're researching, because your role here is to teach, to learn, and research, and innovate. That's what you do. And when we manage this institution, we've tried to do certain things in that area, but I still believe, Dr. Vuguza, we can still do more to make sure that we think about the health and the wellness of people. A sound mind in a sound body. That's my story. A sound mind in a sound body. And I want that to be emphasized, And I know it has to do with diet, it has to do with exercise, it has to do with our working conditions, it has to do with the long hours people put in to make this institution better. But we must reflect on the fact that whilst people are fighting to make this institution better, they have families as well. We must remember that when they are 65, we kick them out of this institution, we throw them back to their families. And probably they've lost their minds. They are no more healthy. So we need to start thinking and making this institution that better. Now, I'd like to close by talking to you about the leadership of this institution, and then I'm going to sit down. Today, it's Prof Marwala's day, and it's Professor Marwala's last stakeholder report. But I want to talk to you about how I enjoyed working with the Council of the University of Johannesburg. We have made sure with Prof Marwala, and I'm not going to talk about the council days when I was not chairperson, I'm talking about when I became chairperson, that we have tried firstly to make sure that the council of this university remains professional. When I say professional, the paperwork, the administration. We don't have a council meeting that takes more than 2 hours. It starts at 1600 hours, probably at 5:30 we finished, or 6 o'clock. And people ask me at the office, Mike, why are your board meetings taking so short a time? Are you doing justice to? We're not here to waste time. We're here to make sure that we make decisions that are effective and are going to impact on the shaping of this institution into the future. So the council of this university has run professionally, I think. Why? Because the council members have done a fantastic job. And I'm confident that they'll be able to employ a great chairperson to replace me. And I'll look forward, and I'll be watching from outside. I'm part of the alumni, so I'll still make noise, but sitting at a different room, probably. If you look at the Senate, the respect, the honor, the ability to communicate with all these institutional structures in this university have been fantastic. There have never been any fights where we spend 2 days, 3 days on an issue. Recently, we were talking about the selection process for a new Vice Chancellor. The meeting took less than 30 minutes. Why? Because these ships are sailing the same direction. And I'm challenging you as the University of Johannesburg. Let me tell you a story. You are changing a chancellor this year. You are changing a vice chancellor next year. The chairperson is leaving. The registrar is leaving. It's too much change at leadership level. Be careful, be careful, be careful. I'm going to leave you with a story about Reginald Jones. Reginald Jones was the CEO of General Electric. They used to call it Generous Electric during Reginald Jones' time in America. It was a big, powerful institution. If you had a toaster in your house, it was GE. If you had a washing machine in your house, it was GE. If you were in a train, it was GE. Everything was General Electric. And when Reginald Jones was selecting a new CEO, he had to select one person, and he had to select amongst quite a number. And the one he selected was somebody who was not expected to become the CEO of GE, by the name of Jack Welch. And when he offered him the job, he said to him, Jack, I'm handing you the Queen Mary, and she is designed not to sink. And Jack Welch snapped and said, I don't want the Queen Mary, I'm going to blow up the Queen Mary. I want speedboats. And so whoever is going to take over this institution, we will be leaving, Prof Marwala will be leaving, I'll be leaving this institution. We live with pride, and you'll see the numbers from Prof Marwala. I'm proud to say, Tshilidzi, you and your team, you've done a fantastic job. You led the council, you led everybody, you've done a fantastic job. I've always stood on the sidelines. I'm good at doing that, watching people being magicians and doing great work. But I'm proud to say that whoever is taking over, don't turn this university into a speedboat. Don't turn this university into a speedboat. And I urge you, go and read a book called The Man Who Broke Capitalism by by David Gellas, when he becomes critical of what Jack Welch did to General Electric. I know a lot of you hail him as the best CEO in the world. Once you've read that book, your mind changes. I'm reviewing that book next week, Friday, with the students here. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to have been associated with the University of Johannesburg. I'm proud to have been associated with the people in this university. And it is a great institution, And there's a university next door, which has turned itself into a high school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't want to say anything about sinking. I know that Prof Marwala is going to give us Queen Mary. Prof Marwala, may I call you to the podium to come and speak to the stakeholders? Thank you.
Sanibonani. Ninjani. Ndimadekwana. Abusheni. Goeienaand. Good evening.
Good evening.
Molweni. Dumelang. No, thank you very much, Chair, for that. This is actually my last stakeholder report at the University of Johannesburg. So I am quite, I'm not an emotional person, but I am quite, appreciative of the support that I have received from the leadership of the University of Johannesburg. What the Chair of Council did not tell you is that he used to call me 6 o'clock every morning. I had to make sure that I have my alarm clock on, you know. So I really appreciate the Chair, your leadership. And we are leaving whoever is going to succeed as a vast empire, if we are to use the language of empires, you know, that is sailing faster than any other university in Africa except one that is slowing down. And it shall be overtaken if we actually continue to do good things. One of the director of JAIAS gave me a book. And he says, but I don't want to give you this book because you might give it to, you might report it on Facebook, and other universities' principals are going to see it. The book is called Winners, and it is written by Alistair Campbell. It's really about, there's a book by Jack Welch called Winning. This one is called Winners, you know. And I'm reminded of an expression that I think I heard it from Litlokwa, that winners concentrate on winning and losers concentrate on winners. Very important things. So what I am reporting here today is not a full story. We are now the second-ranked university in the African continent. And that was not achieved in 2021. It was achieved in 2022. So it will be reported by my successor. So to go back to this book, Winners, he said, you know, there is only 3 things. He calls them Trinity of winning. It's only 3 things. You know, everything occurs in threes. For those of you who are religious, we know about the Holy Trinity. For those of us who belong to fraternities, we know about, what do they call it? You have the freshman, then you have the fellow, and then you have a master, you know. Everything actually happens in 3. So he also explains the success, the winning formula in 3. Says it requires strategy. Not to be confused with tactic, strategy. If you do not have a strategy, then you are on the way to losing. And the strategy, obviously, is how you are going to attain your goals. And our goals were very, very clear. During our tenure, Mr. Teke, it was to position the University of Johannesburg as the university of the fourth industrial revolution. And to measure how successful we have been, you should just go and ask people, what do you associate University of Johannesburg to? Almost everybody will say the fourth industrial revolution. And then, of course, there were, mechanisms in which we were going to, which are really what strategy is about, which involved the creation of institutes to achieve that goal, which involved the use of postdoctoral fellows to achieve that goal, the use of distinguished visiting professors, which we introduced specifically for that, for that purpose, mobilizing financial resources to be able to achieve those goals, and so on and so forth. I can see Sorab is smiling from cheek to cheek. So that's the first one. And of course, if we are to do a competitive analysis, and you look at other institutions in South Africa, it will be very difficult to articulate, for example, what our neighbor is doing. What is our neighbor doing? Our strategy was so effective that our neighbor actually tried to copy it. And there's nothing wrong with copying, in this instance, from best practices. It was so successful that I see a vice chancellor of a university always being photographed with a robot. A blue robot, if I may add, which is not quite as elegant as Spot, our robotic dog. It is yellow. And Mike, you will know that yellow, as a man who spends time in the mining, yellow is a very important color. The infrastructure that is used tends to be yellow. Of course, because of one of the successes of a great American company, Caterpillars, whose things was yellow. So, and the second aspect of success in leadership, to lead institution, is actually leadership. I have actually been observing what has been happening, let's say, at the University of Cape Town. I can say this because of that video that I saw on television where we were under attack, that how can you celebrate number 2 if number 1 is available, And you see the controversies. Now it's about nails. I'm not lying. Now the controversy is about nails. It's all over the news. It was even in the newspapers. In the a symposium or a talk about performance management in one of the faculties, that we are adopting a robotic manner of management, But this is important because if we don't do that, we will still be number 6 according to the QS ranking, which we were just 5 years ago, So leadership is very important. Then the last part is what is called team building. The interplay between individual aspirations and group aspirations is basically is actually managed by building robust teams. And today we were introducing an executive leadership development program that would train all our executives for leadership. And when we are gone, we should even go down to training heads of departments, because we have identified weaknesses there. Of course, it is much more at a tactical level than at a strategic level. So today, I am a bearer of good news. So what are some of the highlights of the University of Johannesburg? The undergraduate success rate, 87.4%. When we came as chair and vice chancellor, it was 85%. If you look at the total number of international students, 4,387, despite COVID, which is supposed to have looked at that. The overall undergraduate satisfaction rate is 90.9%. This is a very satisfied undergraduate cohort. And the postgraduate satisfaction rate is slightly lower, but it is at a dizzying height of 84.7%. You come to research, and I know I'm not going to be the announcer of good news, but when my successor announces next year, this time, he or she will be announcing the #1 research university in South Africa. Today we're #2. We produce more research than any other university except University of KwaZulu-Natal. And when I celebrated that, and it happened last year that we overtook UP, Wits, and Stellenbosch all at the same time. I think you should give yourself a round of applause if you are from the University of Johannesburg. And if you are not from the University of Johannesburg, please give the people of University of Johannesburg a round of applause. If you look at the number of published research on 4IR, this is what our strategy was trying to achieve, 413. Nothing happens without an effort. In Venda, they have an expression, ahuna chino da worara, ngandani hamaranga. Beautiful expression. It basically means that there is not a single thing that will come when you are sleeping than those things that come in your eyes when you are sleeping. They are called maranga. And they are so undesirable that when you wake up, you want to remove them, you know. They come free while you're sleeping, but once you have them, you want them removed immediately because they are not very good, you know. Number of NRF-rated researchers, excellent. And then if you look at the staff, transformation is still a big deal. Our black staff members have also increased. When I became a vice chancellor, almost 43% of our staff members had doctorates. Now we are almost 56%. Bear in mind that the highest university is sitting at 68%. And bear in mind that we have the highest number of postdoctoral fellows, almost 450, and it's going to increase to 650. So this ratio is going to accelerate faster than you expect, because already we're not counting the postdocs here. If you were to count the postdocs as part of our staff, we probably will start being 80% of our staff, close to that, with PhDs. You look at our finances, Nolwazi and the MEC, you always warn me on this, but I am going to defy you and I am going to call a spade a spade. We are leaving you a vast pot of wealth. We found you poor with just $1 billion, under $1 billion rands. Now we're leaving you with a wealth of 3 billion rand. That is only council controlled. Remember, there is other. If it is a total reserves, we will be probably talking about 5 billion. I think you can give Mike and me a round of applause. And the team, and the team, and the team, you know. And by the way, this did not come while we were sleeping. We had to make sacrifices. One of the sacrifices was that we were going to Cape Town with a group of vice chancellors. And I was passing all of them sitting in the business class on my way to the economy class. That was the change of policy that we introduced in order to deal with this. We hope that as soon as we leave, that policy is not going to be reserved. And then you see people, you know, you are with the cohort, you know. Now, the annual surplus for last year was 324 million rands. It's actually quite incredible, Nolwazi. I know sometimes we complain that you are a miser, but this culture of, the Germans call this minimalism, and it comes from the Reformation era. It trying to claw back the excesses of the Catholic Church at the time. I mean, this is not controversy, this is history, you know. And as a result, you go and look at Protestant churches, they look very small, except the Church of England. You know. So we adopted, you know, as, and maybe Nolwazi and I belong to the same church. We are members of the Lutheran Church. And minimalism is almost coded in Lutheranism. So, this 321 million, we were expecting to make a loss. We were expecting to make a loss. And our consolidated assets at 9.2 billion. Now, we know that we were ranked first last year in the world for SDG 8 in the Times Higher Education rankings. And we won 82 national, international, and prestigious awards. That was not the goal. We wanted the Nobel Prize. We actually wanted a Nobel Prize, you know. But it did not happen, Bettin. And we need to ask ourselves very difficult questions. Why are UJ staff members not winning Nobel Prizes? Dreaming is actually a first step towards attaining anything. So Nobel Prizes are not too big to dream. We have to plan them now, even if they're going to be awarded in 40 years. And you can see the rankings. Excellent. I mean, the QS ranking, number 2 in Africa. It's not reflected here because it's the latest. Excellent. I saw an article that was just published now saying that the boxing match between University of Stellenbosch and University of Johannesburg, you know, who would have thought that was possible 10 years ago? That we will be, and this idea of high school down the road, Mike is telling the truth. I used to be on the other side. And when I came here, somebody said, why are you going to the high school down the road? I think we have had the last laugh. And right now, whatever they are doing, UJ is at the top of their minds, you know. So I think that is very important. So we have done well, number 2 in South Africa. The subject rankings, I'm not going to talk about them in chapter and verse, but we are in the money, Peter, if I were to use your language. We are in the money. It is a bull market for the University of Johannesburg if we look at the academic sector as a business, you know. And I think that is important. Of course, the fourth industrial revolution is very important. And it actually gave us an advantage when it came to COVID-19. During the onset of COVID-19, we were the first university to complete the academic year. The following year, which was last year, we were the first university to start the academic year. I remember University of Cape Town, was it March? You know, we already had 1.5 months advantage. And at the end of the year, again, we were the first university to complete the academic year. And the reason for that is because it was a smooth transition for us. We had the technology. We negotiated with telecommunication companies for data. We had devices, almost more than 30,000 devices on the hands of our students at the heart of COVID, you know. This is actually this is because the fourth industrial revolution was not only just an academic project. It was also the way of thinking, the way of improving the way we do things. Of course, there's still lots of things to be achieved, and I am quite confident that they're going to be achieved. We know about our 6 strategic objectives. You know, excellence in research and innovation, excellence in teaching and learning, enriching student-friendly and learning and living experience. Weaknesses are there. Safety around our campuses is an issue. An international profile for global excellence and stature. Again, very, very important. If you are going to play in a global world, you have to get a globally relevant education. And that's what we are trying to do here. National and global reputation management and fitness for global excellence and stature. In summary, we achieved 20 out of 21 KPIs. I think you should give yourself a round of applause. When it comes to excellence in research and innovation, SORAP, we wanted the total number of postgrads to be 3,200. We ended up at 3,500, almost close to 3,600. Percentage of permanent staff with fixed-term academic staff with doctorates, year on year, by the way. We thought we were going to end up at 50%. We were under 50%. Look at the jump. Almost 56%. So during the period, we increased the number of our staff from just under 50% to 56% with doctorates. Accredited research output, we thought 2,000 was our target. We ended up at 2,300. And Peter, I am going to put it in financial terms. So 2,000, each unit gives us 120,000 rands from government, so as government subsidy. So 2,000 is almost
it's about 260 million rands.
260 million. 2,300, it means 300, it's about 350, it's 35 million rands more than we expected. That's really what it was. Do you know what you can do with 35 million rands? Do you know how many postdocs you can get with 35 million rands? That explains our success, you know. Number of published research outputs on fourth industrial revolution, we expected to publish 250. We published 413. Again, this is quite important. Again, give yourself a round of applause. And also to Litlokwa, no, not to SORAP. And Litlokwa, excellence in teaching and learning. Again, overall enrollment, 49,000, 50,000. This one is not really an achievement because government decides how many people we can enroll. percentage of students completing 3-year undergraduate degrees in minimum time. You know, we thought we were going to end up at 38%, because a year before we were under that. We ended up at 43%. It's not where we're supposed to be, but it's important for us to go forward. Undergraduate output, we thought we were going to end up at 9,150, 9,458. Number of students completing artificial intelligence module. You see, artificial intelligence, and I did a PhD in artificial intelligence at the University of Cambridge. I saw Spamandla here. He probably is gone now. We were together there, but he was not studying artificial intelligence. I was the one who was studying it. And it is a technology that is changing every aspect of our lives. So if your graduates do not understand it, they are going to be lost wherever they are. So we have this course that we expect our undergraduate students to do, and they come from all the disciplines. We thought 3,000 of them will complete this and get the certificate on artificial intelligence. It ended up at 4,281. Percentage of students completing 3-year qualifications in minimum time. I think I've talked about this one. Number of academic initiatives advancing for including CEPs, 83, and we ended up at 129. Again, this is an excellent performance. And as the community of the University of Johannesburg, please give yourself a round of applause. An international profile for global excellence and stature sort of. We thought we were going to have 3,800 international students. We ended up with 4,387. During COVID, without COVID, we would be at 5,000. Percentage of international permanent and fixed staff academic, fixed term academic staff, 17.7%. It's a slight up, not a big one, but nonetheless it's quite pleasing. Again, this is an excellent result. On enriching student-friendly and learning and living experience, overall satisfaction, I've already talked about it. We wanted to be at 86%. Now we ended up at almost 91%. Postgraduate, 82.5%. We ended up at 84.7%. National and global reputation, number of awards, we thought we were going to get 50. We ended up with 82. Fitness for global excellence and stature, the numbers are looking good. Annual operating surplus, 100 million versus 325 million that we achieved. Cancer control reserves, we wanted to be at 1.7 billion. We ended up at 3.1 billion. Externally generated funds, we wanted 200 million. We ended up at 357 million. All this is in 1 year, by the way. Third stream income externally generated, we wanted to be at 200 million. We ended up at 321 million. Number of black and permanent fixed academic staff, 635 was the target. We ended up at 647. And then if we look at staff at the ranks of professors and associate professors, 357, we ended up with 363, not a big jump. Black associate professors and professors, 85 to 96, also not 85 was our target, and 96 is what we achieved, not a big one. Number of female associate professors, 135 and 143. This is a very important metrics. We need to have more women in our system. Not a big jump, but it's a jump nonetheless. Reduction in carbon footprint. We are 12%. We ended up at 9%. We now have 13% of our power coming from solar. So this is actually quite important. We continue to manage risks. Even despite our impressive numbers Nolwazi keeps on reminding us that we have to be prudent. The COVID pandemic is not yet over, and we should always factor it out as we plan for the future. Reduced NSFAS and National Research Foundation funding is another risk, given the slow growth of our economy. A threat of cyber attacks on hardware, software, and data is a big deal. I don't see Katuchero here. And we need to keep our eyes on the ball. Safety and security of life and limb, well, we remain very concerned. Our students on campus are very, very safe. It's only when they move outside. The idea, of course, we do have issues inside, but it's not, you know, it's not a big deal. You know, it's not a pandemic. So this is something where our city is failing us. Our city, we have 50,000 students and almost 8,000 full-time and part-time staff who come in and out of our campuses. We should be treated as a special case. It's probably the highest concentration of people of any entity in Johannesburg. And whoever is going to take over, that's another thing that you will have to take into account. Increasing irrecoverable student debt is an issue. It's not as bad as other institutions, but it is something that we need to work on. Looking ahead, I think teaching and learning is a big deal. Throughput rates, and so on and so forth. Student experience and employability is another issue. UJ must continue to offer leadership as a thought and innovation leader, and integrating SDGs into our strategy is what comes next. So thank you very much for that, for listening to me. I think this was a successful year, and I wish you all the best for the years to come. Ngiyabonga, ngiyalibuwa, ndiyalibuwa, enkosi, bayadanki.
Another big round of applause. The year of plenty and the year of abundance. The chair came and announced his retirement, and the VC came and announced his departure. I'm sure you are expecting me to do the same, but I will not. Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. Usually the president of the country gives SONA, which is the State of the Nation address. This one was SOJA, the State of University of Johannesburg address, and that was very good. So at that point, I would like to welcome Mr. Peter Armitage. Mr. Peter Armitage will be our keynote speaker this evening. He is a chartered accountant, and he started his career in global financial markets in 1994. He has worked as an analyst, head of research, and chief investment officer at a number of SA's top financial institutions, including Merrill Lynch, Nedbank, Investec, Wealth and Investment, etc. Mr. Armitage has been rated the top investment analyst in the annual Financial Mail rankings, a record 21 times, I could not believe, and was also rated as the top analyst in South Africa by Finance Week in 1999. Mr. Armitage founded the Anchor Group in January 2012 and has built it to a 100 billion global investment management and wealth business serving over 15,000 clients. I think that the Vice Chancellor, with his upward trajectory, is headed for the 100 billion. But let us hear from Mr. Armitage how he has managed to do that. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, everybody. Alita. It's an absolute pleasure to participate and be part of what's turned out to be quite a celebration of two amazing human beings who've done amazing things for an institution over the course of the last few years. Professor, yourself, you and me have something in common, is we have Mr. Mike Teke as our chairman. Mike was one of our first clients, and we brought him on board, and he's been a shareholder and chairman of our business for many years. And what we have in common is the 6 o'clock phone call. And I worked out tonight that he speaks to you for roughly 15 minutes, because he phones me at 6:15. So I'm going to talk for about 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to try and keep it short. There's lots of slides here and lots of data. If anybody wants them, feel free, we'll send them out to you. But to give, the topic was quite a complex one, leading in the face of global and national socio-economic challenges, instruments for local solutions. In summary, to kind of give you a picture of where we sit from a global and South African perspective, I think one of the things we always forget is that our fortunes are very tied to the actions of politicians all around the world. And I think right now, businessmen and people running universities are doing much better jobs than the politicians out there. So I bring to you a troubled outlook: high inflation and increasing interest rates, economic growth pressure, ongoing strikes, service delivery issues, load shedding in the future, troubled politics, leadership has flouted rules and changes abound, and healthcare is not delivering. In summary, thank goodness we don't live in the United Kingdom. I think the reality is the grass isn't always green on the other side. A lot of the world is going through issues, and we've got the talent and potential in South Africa to overcome. I think quite a big sadness for me in my world, in the financial services world. There's a lot of 25 to 30-year-olds who've been educated by places like this, white, black, colored, Indian, who leave in the country because the lights are off and there's issues. But I've actually got it staying at my house at the moment. Somebody left for the UK and they come back on holiday, and they said the grass isn't always green on the other side. I think the reality is there's a year of market volatility and opportunity that awaits us. I think one of the messages to get through today is that things go through cycles. At the bottom of the cycle, you never think things will come up. At the top of the cycle, you always believe that it's going to carry on forever. And the world that we live in, we've had kind of a market crash this year. And what I tell people back at the office is don't get too excited when it goes up, and don't get too depressed when it comes down, because things do work themselves out. What we'll always have in South Africa is great people. I think if you see the quality of an organization like this and the people that come through, we have the privilege in our business of experiencing people who've had great success, and you see the quality of that. And the quality of the private sector and very distinct sections of the public sector. It's people that make things happen, but it's only educated people that have really got the chance to do it. So an institution like that is critical. And then the passion to do it, and I think the hunger shines through in an organization like this. And we also have the sun. The sun won't stop shining. We can create power with it, which is a distinct need in South Africa. And we have a beautiful country that people want to make flourish. In our world, in the financial services market, and it feeds through into many aspects of society, because you're talking to people whose net asset values have declined. I think your university has done an incredible job to increase its net asset value from a financial point of view. That's only one attribute of it. But I think one shouldn't underestimate the fact that you need a strong financial backing to do even half of what you're trying to do. So from a world point of view, we're going through a normal economic cycle. Cycles come and go. Cycles are quite simple, ultimately. I'm scared that there's an economics professor here, because I might make it sound too simple. But things get overheated in the world, interest rates have to go up, things slow down, and interest rates come down again. What we've experienced in the world at the moment, and one of the key things to understand in South Africa, is the world is in two very different places at the moment. America has got overheated. The average American family got sent a check in the post for 200,000 Rand 18 months ago, and more about 6 months later. Literally, a check that they could go and cash. That was the stimulus. That's resulted in things getting overheated and massive inflation flowing through. And they're putting on the brakes and increasing interest rates. And that's part of the cycle. And all cycles have similar characteristics, but they also have differences. And the one big difference, obviously, the double body blow of Putin invading Ukraine created all sorts of other consequences. On the other side of the world, China's inflicted what some would claim is a kind of own goal by still, unlike everybody else in the world, having a zero COVID policy, and they've still been locking down big parts of their economy. So that's slowed dramatically, and China is in fact now stimulating the economy. So you've got America increasing interest rates and China decreasing interest rates and putting a huge amount of money into the banks. And China, the most of any country in the world, has the ability to make a decision to stimulate because it's centrally controlled and a message goes out and goes right across the country. South Africa and the South African stock markets, and by implication a lot of the wealth of people in the business and your own university, is much more influenced by China than America, and in many instances, from a stock market point of view, more by China than South Africa. Commodity prices are effectively set by China. They utilize somewhere between 50 and 70% of most commodities, and a lot of our fortune over the course of the next 6 to 12 months is the success of the Chinese government in making that happen. What has changed for the next 2 or 3 decades, which is very different to other cycles, we're left behind with very challenging global geopolitics. Obviously, the Russian-Ukraine threat and how China reacted to that, China kind of circling around Taiwan, are issues that ourselves, more our kids will have to deal with. And the kind of Cold War started in many ways. South Africa is structurally challenged, but I want to give you some ideas of hope here today because of people, passion, and the sun. And there are many things that are at a low at the moment, and I think will be better in 12 to 24 months' time. We'll have more electricity, maybe not 24 hours of electricity, but perhaps a little better. That might take 3 years. Inflation will be a lot lower. Interest rates will have spiked and be already on the way down. So you only have to pay your mortgage rates for your houses are still going to get higher for the next 12 to 14 months, and then they'll start to come down again because it is a cycle. So save up. Grab a few extra waters when you're out there because we're all going to still have to tighten our belts a bit. But I think our Reserve Bank acted very prudently and acted in advance, and many people were critical of them when they started increasing interest rates long before places like the European Union, where they were trying to protect the economic growth and are now very late to the party. Politics, I think, will be better and clearer. I think this isn't the political speech, but I think there's a lot that has to feed through the system, and hopefully in 12 to 24 to 36 months' time, we've got people really just want some certainty, and it's the uncertainty that's giving us issues. And corruption convictions. I attended an RMB Morgan Stanley conference about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was all online. It was during COVID times, and people were asked, there were about 500 foreign investors, and the question was, what would be the biggest positive for South Africa from a foreign investment perspective? And it was action happening on corruption. So the key impact from an economic and wealth perspective around the world is inflation. You can see this graph. Inflation's gone through the roof. Obviously, a lot of it's the oil price. A lot of it is food prices, and a lot of it caused by different factors. Just to quickly remind you, you want inflation in a country, but like your porridge, you don't want it too hot or you don't want it too cold. If it's too hot, it erodes savings and purchasing power. You can buy less with your money. It delays your investment decision, and it increases the cost of borrowing. And that's where we're at the moment. You don't want it too cold, because picture if you think that prices are going down, you're going to delay your spending decision. If there's a nice Toyota Corolla that you want to buy that costs 200,000 Rand, well, that's a bit of a dream, I guess. If it's going to be 180,000 Rand in a year's time, everybody stops spending. So you don't want inflation too hot or too cold. You want it in a range where it's just right. You want to spend because prices are going up at a reasonable level, but your finances and your wealth are not being eroded. So what's caused the inflation? We had all the supply chain issues. In COVID, all the factories closed down. Then America came and gave everybody free money, and it happened to an extent in Europe and other countries around the world. And they couldn't get people to come back to work, and the factories couldn't start producing quickly enough. So big supply chain logistics, ships waiting outside harbors for months. And then you had Russia and Ukraine. So Russia supplies 50% of Europe's coal needs. And they start turning that off, and prices go through the roof. So you had this accumulation of factors which led to prices going up and absolutely being squeezed. The good news is that, in our view, about 70% of inflation is caused, at the moment, is being caused by supply as opposed to demand. And that is peaking. So picture the oil price got to $120. It's now sitting, hovering around $90. Ukraine has released a whole lot of grain. Between Russia and Ukraine, they account for 40% of the world's global grain exports. So food prices have come down by about 20% around the world. And remember that inflation is a rate of change. So if it stays flat, if prices are flat on a year ago, inflation is naught. You need it to carry on going on. So the good news is, if you look at financial instruments in our world, the different options and swaps you can take, we've kind of fed through, and the market is factoring in inflation coming right down to kind of by the end of next year, the middle of the following year, back down to the 2.5% level. And that's the kind of just right spot for America, and this is where economic cycles turn and come back. So central banks have responded by increasing rates very rapidly, and in reality, folks like myself, in aggregate, are very bad at forecasting the future. So for 2022, and I think that's one of the things I was thinking, I was sitting there thinking about a term where in South Africa, and some of the charts that I'm going to show you, in aggregate, it looks very challenging, and the numbers have gone, a lot of the metrics don't look great. But individually, there's an amazing amount of excellence, and that's what we've got to concentrate on. At the beginning of this year, the average expectation for US interest rate hikes was that they wouldn't go up the whole year. Now, by the end of the year, they probably will have peaked. They would have put them up by about 2.5%. And in fact, interest rates will start declining in America next year. South African inflation hasn't been too bad. I think we haven't got the same dynamics as they've got in the rest of the world. So what I've circled there is it's going to peak this year and then start kicking down. So our Reserve Bank, you must remember, normal rates in South Africa are actually about 0.5% or 1% higher than they are at the moment. During COVID, we reduced our rates significantly. And we started early in terms of increasing, long before the average country around the world. The governor of our Reserve Bank is an extremely kind of prudent and forward-looking person, and the people he's got around him. So we're going to carry on going up a little bit, but then I think just like they did in this cycle, they'll start decreasing quite quickly. Consumer confidence is at a low, and this has got a huge correlation with electricity, and power is a major issue in South Africa. I don't know what you guys feel like, but certainly from my work point of view, when the lights have been off the night before, people are grumpy the next day. It's almost like myself and my wife light a candle and have a glass of wine. We try and make fun out of it, but eventually it does wear you down. So the world on average grows by about 3.5% per annum. And that's why you want to be invested in stock markets, because if there's real growth of 3.5% and there's inflation of 2%, companies can invest and make good returns, and the value of businesses go up over time. So if you invest in a global stock market, you should go up kind of 7 to 9% per annum in dollars over time. The good news is the world hasn't ended. It's a lot tougher for people. These global aggregate pictures are often quite disinteresting to people, because what really happens is what really matters is how much you're paying for your fuel and how much you're paying on your mortgage. The good news is the world isn't about to collapse. It's slowing down a bit. We had a big recovery, that 6.1 in 2021 as we recovered from COVID, and we'll go back down, we'll go back to the kind of 3.5%. So wealth can be created, and importantly, and this is the kind of key, is if companies can invest money and earn a reasonable return on capital. In order to do so, they need productive individuals, they need a market, and they need the power to stay on. So a bit of a decline going into next year, but then you've got a desynchronized global economy where China is actually going to provide a bit of a fillip when the US comes back down a bit next year. The sadness is for South Africa is we're not achieving the same as the rest of the world, that kind of 3.5%. We've been lingering around the 2% level, and that's the prospects for 2022 and 2023. And that's what we've all got to work towards, is getting us back up to our potential. That's also illustrated in South Africa's real GDP, and you can see we had some excellent years back in 2004 to 2009. A lot of that was driven by a Chinese commodity price boom. It's a massive factor for the growth of our company, and we were able to take advantage of it. You've had very high commodity prices in the globe again now over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, but we haven't been able to properly harness that. And you can see the kind of flattening of the curve. And to take account of the increasing population in South Africa, we need economic growth at a higher rate. As a result, our unemployment is a horrifying number. I can't think of anything more humbling for somebody and more detrimental than not being able to get a job. And one of the key reasons for that is our economy has become consumption rather than production-based. And I find this graph very interesting, where retail activity, so how the retailers are doing and what they're selling, has been on a nice constant uptick with the COVID at the end. But our actual manufacturing activity has been going steadily downwards. In other words, we continue to consume, and there's money around, but people are increasingly consuming products that are made by other countries rather than South Africa. Our electricity available for distribution has just been on a gradual decline since 2012, and not enough money has gone into capital formation. I think some of the changes that have happened in terms of replacing kind of our state-owned enterprises, government spend, corporate confidence, is at quite a low. And in fact, when we talk to companies, there is an appetite to spend more. So if people can, all that you need is some certainty and some excitement on the horizon, and there's no shortage of capital. When the government and NERSA came out with saying to the private sector that they would be allowed to spend money on electricity generation, believe me, there's 5 times as much money available as actually can be spent. So the appetite is there, we have to create the conditions. But there is some quite nice upside potential in mining, energy, renewables, roads. And there is room for optimism on this scale. COVID, I think we'll only know what this graph looks like again quite some time out, but certainly all indications are actually what's turning out in the world now from a COVID perspective. It's not so much what happens with COVID, it's the way governments react to COVID that are having an impact on economic growth. The great news at the moment, and where we've got another chance to kind of really grab it by the horns, is our tax collections are well ahead of last year. So the commodity boom that's happened, driven by supply chain constraints, China went through a reasonable period before the slowdown now, but the high commodity prices have resulted in mining companies making super profits, and that's flowed through into incredible tax collections. So in April and May this year, we were collecting about 12% of our budget for the year. So you picture, in any 1 month, 100 divided by 12. What is that? 8.5%. We're actually collecting about 12.5. So the government's actually got some nice money now. They've got money to spend, and the Chinese stimulus coming through, you should see that being sustained for some time. So we've got the raw material, we've got the people, we've just got to make it work. For the first time, South Africa got derated by the credit bureaus, and for the first time, we've actually seen some re-ratings upwards. Some other reason for hope is foreign tourism has started to pick up again. It's an absolute mess. touring around Europe and the like, for those of you who follow those kind of stories. And South Africa, I think, will come more into line. So we've had a tough time. We're going through this economic cycle. We've had a tough time from a stock market perspective. But I always say on the stock market, if you go into Edgar's and there's a dress that you really like, and it costs 300 Rand, and somebody over the microphone says, you can now buy that dress for 250 Rand, you're going to buy 2 of them. But for some reason, with listed assets, when prices come down, people want to run out the shop because suddenly they're concerned that it's not the asset that they thought it was. So the stock market came off, depending on what you look at, between 25 and 35% this year. But our projected returns for the next 12 months are the highest they've been in 5 years, simply because things are cheaper and the world isn't about to fall down. So these are just some pictures of the economic cycle. There's different things to be invested in, but I think the key thing to remember is these things are cycles, and we do see through them, that we can be on the other side. So you've got China that's less progressed on the right-hand side. They're in a different phase of the economic cycle. And the good news for us is as they go through and stimulate, that has a kick-off benefit to South Africa. So I think South Africa has got another chance, a kind of another 12, 18-month window based on global conditions, where they're generating a lot of cash. Tax revenues are good. Within 12 months, interest rates will start coming down, and another chance to leverage off that. But I think the reality of South Africa is that we're just way too slow at doing the things that we obviously have to do. The electricity issue had almost created a complete meltdown for us to take some actions that everybody, all the experts were saying we should have done 2.5 years ago. We're seeing the same thing in rail at the moment, where things are getting worse and worse. We simply can't get all of our commodities to the harbors. And it's going to take even more of a crisis before some real actions are taken. So, I'm not going to go through too many of these. I think just, very simply from a global perspective, and a good way to look at stock markets, people always look at indexes and they don't really know what they mean. But if you look at an individual company, so we love Nike as a company. We think it's best of breed, one of the best businesses in the world. It's got some natural growth. They're selling more and more online. They make 3 times as much money from selling a pair of shoes online than through a retail store, because now they don't need the wholesaler and the retailer and somebody else making money. Nike pre-COVID was $100 a share, and then because of all the stimulus and madness, it went up to $180 a share. So that was too expensive. The market crashed and it came down to $100. And this is where it's quite simple. You go, it's a much more valuable company than it was in 2019, and am I happy to buy some of those shares today? Well, yes, I'm pretty confident that this share will be $150 in 3 years' time. So if I buy it now and it goes down to 90 or, the journey along the way, it doesn't really matter if you take a view on where the value will be. So from a South African point of view, feeding that through to back home, there's been steady delivery of structural reform. This is an RMB list of all the things that have happened. But I got quite depressed reading this, actually, when you see the 1 or 2 years between the different actions and different things. And you see some things that were announced that, kind of only happening 12, 18 months. So the machinery of getting things done is slow. We need some quicker action. But we are in many instances, a significantly better place than we were 2 or 3 years ago. The consumer in South Africa is not in a bad place. There's a few charts that I'm not going to go through slide by slide. Here's the maths of electricity. There's total Eskom supply of about 46, gigawatts? Gigawatts, Mark? I'm getting my megawatts. Yeah. Eskom's not going to, Eskom's capacity ain't going to increase, but they'll have more machines working in a few years' time. But the private sector is being allowed to spend money, invest, and get a return. And you'll see a massive amount flowing through. Unfortunately, it still shows a deficit over the course of the next 2.5 years. But things, as of 2 to 3 years' time, will start to get a little bit better. One of the other things that in our world, in the financial services world, is there's talk of us possibly being added to the grey list. The countries around the world mutually evaluate each other. and determine, and this is, a lot of this is focused around global terrorism, money laundering and crime. That's kind of the key focus behind the FATF. And South Africa is their last evaluation have been found wanting on a few different scores. It's not an absolute crisis, it's solvable. The things that we're not complying with. So we're complying with most of the things in the private sector. In the government sector, there's things that government have got to fix to stop this happening. So targeted financial sanctions related to terrorism and terrorism financing. And government's actually made quite a few of the right statements on this, but haven't implemented. Politically exposed persons, they found that South Africa isn't dealing with that according to global standards. New technologies, so all the stuff that you're creating, Professor, they would like to be a little bit regulated a little better, and reliance on third parties. So this is quite a technical list and in many instances solvable. But if you go on the grey list, it can result in the currency weakening a bit. It's a little less confidence in the country. It's not an all-fall-down scenario, but it's less than ideal. It happened to Mauritius a few years ago, and they worked hard and got back off it. So this is something you'll see in the headlines quite a lot. Obviously, a lot of people are using it to their benefit as a tool when they want to create scare stories. It's not the end of the world. It's just a list. But it's a negative, not a positive, and we can solve it if we want to. So what are the growth industries in South Africa? If we're growing at 1 to 2%, that's in aggregate, as I've been saying throughout the presentation, which ain't great. But individually and beneath that, some things are going backwards and some things are going quite nicely. Renewable energy and other electricity-related services is a massive growth area over the course of the next few years. Financial services, our banking remains world-class. I've taken foreign investors around South Africa for 25 years, and one of the things that they've always been very impressed by is the quality of the financial services personnel, and we've created some amazing assets and things that we can take around the world. Tourism, you should see a revival back to normal. Education, we think, is a massive growth sector. The demand is insatiable. It's the ability for that to be financed, and technology services. So, rounding it all up, the globe is going through a cycle. Geopolitics is the biggest risk out there. Everything else will pass. Everything will be all right. Flowing that through into South Africa, a lot of those charts are quite discouraging, but we've got some money in the bank, and we're collecting lots of taxes at the moment. And if we can just speed up the implementation of many policies which are much more investor-friendly, and there's some nice potential. So we've got the people, we've got the passion, we've got the sun. Now you've got to give the people some power to keep the lights on, and the platform on which to perform with that passion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I think after this presentation, I can call you Peter now. Can I call upon the VC to respond? Over to you, VC. Before the VC, can we please give Mr. Armitage a big round of applause?
Wow. I think I'm going to invest in Anchor Capital. No, thank you very much, Peter, for that. I'm just getting my notes that I took. This is really what makes our world go round. The finances are a very important part of our lives. People have tried to kill the financial sector. We know in the book What is to be Done by Vladimir Lenin that they tried to destroy the financial market, and it never really worked. So, as the University of Johannesburg, many of the issues that have been raised are very important. Issues of inflation. Because, and this is probably this concept of finance for non-financial managers becomes very important. What is the difference between nominal and real money? You know, those are very important issues. You know, because sometimes I'm not too sure whether we are able to differentiate the two. You know, growth. I seem to remember COSATU Secretary General talking about joblessness growth. My answer to that is that you can't grow for a long time and it does not have impact on employment and other important factors of our economy. And I think one of the things, and I have actually been doing data mining project on this. How many times do our ministers mention the word growth, economic growth? How much does economic growth feature in our economic strategy, if we have such a thing? Because there's no way we are going to deal with the social, economic, and political challenges that we face unless we grow. China is China because it grows. And it has been growing by more than 8% for, I don't know, for how long. We have even forgotten for how long, you know. And that is why everybody needs to be there. So when we talk about investment into South Africa, growth must actually be at the core of our strategy. I was looking at some of the documents of a political party. I'm not going to name the political party. And there is this concept of appropriation without compensation. Sounds very good politically, but where will it lead South Africa into? Zimbabwe tried to do that. In fact, Zimbabwe did it. Appropriation without compensation. Compensation is a very important incentive for economic activity. If you take it away and people are not secure about the assets they hold, growth is going to die. And we know what happened if we look at the Zimbabwean economy. That's very important. I will go back to this issue of inflation. As the University of Johannesburg, we use it to negotiate salary increase. And there are two inflation, Peter, that we worry about. We worry about the national inflation, but we also worry about the higher education inflation. It's not the same thing. Because unlike many organizations that almost consume everything that is made domestically, just our library books, I can see here, Maria is here, are all priced in dollars. You know, these online platforms that we use in the library to buy electronic books, they're all priced in dollars, which means it is the inflation plus the movement in exchange rate. And it is always higher than the inflation, you know. And it makes higher education inflation higher than the normal inflation that other countries, other organizations have, you know. And as the University of Johannesburg, I know that we have not invested enough time to understand these concepts and train ourselves so that we can be able to understand. I think that is quite important. And back on inflation, I keep on hearing an attack on our policy of inflation targeting. Some people, I think it is an economist from Wits University, Professor Chris Malikane, basically says that why are you worried about inflation? They even invoke something called expansionary economy. effectively, the advocacy of printing money as an engine for growth. We know what happened in Germany in the 30s, if we read history, which they used the strategy of printing money in order to, and this even became more louder when Western countries, certainly United States, was printing money in order to come out of inflation. For me, I always say that, the United States obviously is the reserve currency. The dollar is the reserve currency, so they probably have the luxury of that. But if they are not careful and they are not producing enough goods, the same crisis that the British faced when the dollar was replaced the pound. The dollar replaced the pound because the British economy was not producing enough. So they ran short of things they could sell, and there was no incentive for anybody to hold pounds because you were not wanting goods from the United Kingdom. And I can see that, if this trend of the movement of the center of production to China continues, it will just be a question of time before the dollar loses its status as a reserve currency. If we start importing 80% of what we consume, maybe we should start using renminbi. Okay, that's the currency of China. So all these things are quite important for us to understand. Now, the issue of unemployment. I actually just finished writing an opinion piece for the Sunday Times. Please go and buy it and read this opinion piece. And I'm talking about the value of education. In 2021, the national unemployment rate was 32.5%. The unemployment rate for university graduates was actually 9.5%. It's still high, but what that statistics actually tells us is that education is important. It's a very old, everybody knows it now, that if you don't have enough educated people, you are not going to succeed economically, So the unemployment issue has to be tackled. And I wrote an article on the Daily Maverick on the 10 strategies to deal with unemployment rate, Part of the reason why we have high unemployment rate is that we are no longer competitive. We are simply no longer competitive. And this concept of competitiveness, we are not paying enough attention to it. It's very, very simple. If you are producing a good at a price of 100 rands, and the same good can be obtained in India for 5 rands. What it basically means is that you're going to be closing shop in the future. Because the concept of buying and selling is not nationalistic. When you go and buy goods and services, you don't first ask the question, where has it been made? You want a good price. There are people who try to do it, to say, you have to look where it is made. When I was an undergraduate student in North America, that was the time in which Honda Acute, I think there was a car called Honda Acute, was the best-selling car in North America. And the Americans were very, very worried. Then they had this campaign, Buy American. You had gas station, gas is petrol, where if you were driving an American car, you'll be given a discount. Clearly, it was not a long-term strategy because that discount was not going to be for a long time. And I remember George Bush going to Japan to negotiate that Japanese people, Japanese companies, you have to buy American parts, at least in your cars, And it was a disaster. You can go and check it on YouTube. The president was George Bush Sr. I think he was so stressed, he puked on the Japanese prime minister. You can go and check it. You can check the video, it's there, you know. He puked, you know. By the way, that's good. If our leaders are worried about these issues, it's a good sign. He was worried about those things. And of course, we know that he lost the election. He lost the election because the economy was not working, you know. So the issue of unemployment is really about competitiveness. And the competitiveness means we really have to identify that aspect that we are going to use as a competitive advantage. I have asked quite a lot of people that what is South Africa's competitive advantage? Pick a sector, the mining sector, Mr. Teke. What is our competitive advantage? You can pick the textile sector, whatever remains of it. You know, what is our competitive? Because in the 90s and the 2000s, we knew what the competitive advantage of China was. It was the cost of labor. It was fairly well-trained people who are able to produce goods at a fraction of the cost because the cost of labor was very, very low. We can see what is happening to India and we can more or less know what their competitive edge. It's the same thing, you know, fairly well-educated people and the cost of labor that is very, very low. But what is our competitive edge? What is our competitive, what is that mechanism we're going to use to compete, you know? And sometimes, and this is a South African phenomenon, we tend to think we are richer than we are, you know. And normally we use the amount of resources we have as a measure of how wealthy we are. There is an economic concept to answer that question if we want to know how wealthy we are. It's called the resource curse. It effectively says that resource-rich countries tend to be poorer than countries without resources. And in fact, you know, of the OECD countries, only Canada and Australia are resource-based economies. The rest are not. So as we are thinking about our competitive edge, we need to factor that into account. That just because we have minerals or whatever remains out of that does not mean that we are competitive. Because anybody can be able to get those minerals with the sophistication of the global supply chain very, very quickly. And then there is this issue that you raised, Peter. You know, we have become a consumer economy. You just have to go to something called Instagram. And Dr. Vukuza, Instagram is a program where people post videos, you know, and you see how materialistic we have become. How materialistic we have become. And then you say, this materialism is not going to last if it is not accompanied by production. Serious production, you know. Now, this is the issue of culture. And I have talked about the culture of minimalism as a good Lutheran. And it also means that we really have to change, you know, our role models in our community are no longer the people that are supposed to be role models. And it is going to have an economic cost. It is going to have an economic cost. It will reflect itself on our economic growth. It is going to reflect itself on our rate of employment, and so on and so forth. Then, Peter, you talk about issues of power. You know, I'm an engineer. You know, I was trained as a mechanical engineer, and I was a professor of electrical engineering. But what people don't realize is that I have actually spent a lot of time in state-owned enterprises for my sins. You know, I was at State Information Technology, State IT CETA, the State Information Technology Agency. I was at City Power. I was at Dinel, and not during those horrible years, but during the golden years, you know. And there's this ideological thing in South Africa that, you know, no matter how badly a state-owned enterprise is actually performing, don't get rid of it. And it's a wrong premise. And Dinel is actually proving us, you know, that you can't sustain Dinel unless it produces goods and services. And it's not going to produce goods and services if it is failing to pay its workers. If it is failing to pay its workers, do you think it is investing in production? Of course, no. I mean, you know, it's a hierarchy of needs, you know. If you can't do the basics, then the real thing that you are supposed to do, you won't be able to do, you know. So the power crisis is, you know, is a big crisis. And I always say, and I've said it quite loudly, that if our solution, if we are going to look at ESCOM as our solution, we are going to be very, very disappointed. Simply because we just don't have, we don't even have the capacity to make Medupi and Kusile work. You know, we chose supercritical power station without necessarily having world-class engineers. For those of us who are engineers, anything that is supercritical requires the amount of precision that you need to get real engineers, not amateur ones. No. And of course, the issue of brain drain has not helped the issue. You know, so I don't think an organization can lose the amount of skills that, to the extent that ESCOM has lost, and really survive. So my answer is very simple to the power crisis, is that we will have to have distributed power system. And there are certain decisions that we have made where we are allowing certain things to be made, you know. So, and then finally, tax. You know, we are not going to tax our way out of this crisis, you know. Especially if only, I can't remember the number, at one stage it was 5 million people were paying tax in a population of 60 million. Maybe now it is better. Maybe it is 10 million. But we simply have too few people who are paying tax. And for us to be able to get out of this economic quagmire, we really have to grow. So thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. This is a great institution with great ideas, and we are going to be watching how it is going to be number one in the next 5 years. Ngiyabonga. Thank you. Enkosi. Nakensa. Ndiyalibuwa. Kiyalibuwa. Bye, danki.
The VC has already thanked you, but I also just need to thank you myself. You've been a wonderful audience, but also thank you to the Vice Chancellor, Mr. Armitage. They say you watinda bafazi, watindi mbokoto. You hit economics and then you hit the Vice Chancellor. He just gets excited by that. You can see that he actually now responded so comprehensively, it became a lecture on its own. But that is our Vice Chancellor for you. So thank you so much for that. And as I draw to a close, and I want to invite you to next door, but before I do that, shall I thank the team chair and the Vice Chancellor for the sterling leadership that they have given us. The chair, and you were saying this was your last stakeholder report launch. Thank you for your leadership. Your frank leadership, your concise leadership, your efficient leadership. You taught us how to be bold, and your transformational leadership. We shall never forget you, ever. But also, thank you to Professor Marwala for that kind of curiosity about knowledge and forever agile and always wanting to follow where knowledge is. We can never thank you enough. Mr. Peter Armitage, I now know why you won 21 times as an investment analyst. You have this thing of delivering bad news in such a gentle manner. You know, you told us so much was broken, but you said it in such a beautiful, and your body language was so, and so the message of hope, we receive it, and we are thankful for the message of hope, that whereas things are so bad, but this too shall pass. And I hope that all that we see, be it politics, be it economics, be it performance, be it our relationships, if we're going through a bad time, all this shall pass as well. So thank you so much for that. Who else do I thank? I thank my team for putting this together. Where is he? Priyal, and also Lebogang, he's somewhere there in the sky, in the cloud, and everybody else who put themselves together. He's on YouTube. To everybody else who put together this day, and thank you so much. Now you must wonder, where is the report? I mean, we've been talking about the launch of a report, but there's no report. So the report is there in the cloud, and as you open your computers, you'll find it. And so I want to thank you so much. Oh, I see Professor Van Liel. Is this also your last stakeholder launch? No? In this capacity, okay. So for those whose this is the last, thank you so much. It's been great having you for the last 5 years. So I'd like to invite you next door to have some drinks and refreshments, and then enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you so much.